excited to be here with my fellow writers. Thank you, Dane, for inviting me again. This is my second reading here at the library. I'm going to read from a new short story that I've been working on. I will only be able to read half of it, so I apologize you don't get the end. But just a little information. The names are a little weird, so I'm going to kind of preface that for you guys. The main character's name is Feeling, as in the feeling emotion. There's a character named Driver and also a character named Tether. So the names are a little strange. The name of this short story is Islander. Afternoons have been getting cloudier for a week. For Feeling, this meant two things. His time playing in the alley would get shorter, and there'd be fewer tourists coming to the island. Copenhagen was small, and travelers from places he'd never see made it seem even smaller. At 9, he was aware of his limitations. The tourist port of Tong Sala sat wedged between a central grouping of mountainous hills and the calm Gulf of Thailand. His family's restaurant and home above were on the outskirts, butting against the sloping edge of the lower hills. He'd never been farther from home than the end of the pier where he sold coconut drinks. Rainy season only made his sense of the island's boundaries stronger. In the alley, Feeling watched the other boys do battle with their marbles. Feeling's friend Driver and another boy had just drawn a circle in dirt red as the morning sun. They set their mibs, the smaller target marbles, in two crossing lines. Once the game began, the mibs scattered about the circle like a tiny, chaotic solar system. His obsession for marbles only equaled his fascination with the planets. Jupiter's fiery yellow and orange, bright red Mars, and cool blue-white Neptune. All those worlds reflected in miniature glass globes, hovering just out of Feeling's reach. Few of the boys had their own set. Families could barely afford clothes. Feeling wore the tattered shirts and holey shorts passed from his older brother, Tether. Everything he had came from things Tether had owned. But Tether never owned any marbles, so there weren't any to be passed down. And with a third kid on the way, there was no use in asking. Driver won his third marble and raised his fist victoriously. Clapping with the other boys circled around the players, Feeling cheered for his friend. Rain felt quicker than a snake down a palm tree. It wiped out the marble arena in the dirt, and the boys scrambled to get home. Driver gathered his marbles, but didn't stop to put them in his pouch. Running in front of Feeling's bike, he slipped and fell in the mud of the alley, releasing a dozen marbles from his fist. Feeling climbed off his bike to help Driver to his feet and retrieve the scattered marbles. Putting them in his pouch, Driver thanked Feeling and ran home. Feeling didn't know why, but he looked back behind where Driver had fallen. A bright green and yellow shooter, unlike any planet he'd seen, sat in the darkening mud. He snatched it up and ran after his friend, leaving his bike. Clenching his fist, he worried that he too might fall and let loose the little planet. When he caught up to Driver, the boy's mother had him by the arm, jabbing her finger in his belly where mud stained his shirt. He looked at Feeling in a way that did not need words. Feeling had been on the sharp end of his mother's fingernail before, not a pleasant experience. Worse with someone watching. Feeling looked away and caught the rain dripping from the thatched roof in his empty hand. He hoped Driver wouldn't be mad at him. He thought of leaving, but Driver's mom stopped yelling and disappeared into the house. Feeling turned, watching her go, and presented the shooter in his dry palm. Both boys stared at it for a long time, and it wobbled between them. Feeling wondered if Driver was too embarrassed, or if he did not realize it was his own marble. As though his body had just caught up with his thoughts, Driver's hand shot to Feeling's shoulder. "You can have it," he said, and turned into his house. The marble seemed to shine a little brighter and weigh heavier, as though Driver's words released it into a new master. He rolled it between his fingers, and holding it to his eye, the alley disappeared. He'd never seen one so close. Scratches and nicks covered the surface, and tiny bubbles, worlds within worlds, intruded on what from afar looked like perfectly fused swirls. but even they were frayed. Pulling it away, the layers melded together without flaw. The rain began to pelt him harder. Feeling tucked his prize deep into his pocket and began pedaling home. The shops had closed, their merchandise hidden under colorful canopies. Tourists huddled together under any shelter they could find. Feeling was soaked, the tires slinging spurts of water from the pavement in his face. After every couple pedals, he risked steering with one hand to pinch the fabric over the marble. The trip between his home and Tong Salah took nearly an hour. Home looked like every other restaurant and guest house on the island. Dark teak pilings, the knots and cracks still showing, some crooked as a bent knee before jutting straight up toward the thatched roof. Its only discernible trait was the sign hanging off the front, a wooden oval with a stick figure imitation of the island, brown hills surrounded by blue jagged waves, and sloped ashore cafe in golden letters at the bottom. Inside, low tables with bright, intricately patterned pillows for chairs spotted the dull gloss of the black-brown teak floors. The house was in the back of